Oh yeah, we can always be relied upon for water. Great. All right. So this is the main part of the show for today. Bless you. Philippe Lazzarini, who, as you know, is the Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, just got out of consultations with the Security Council, and now he's here to talk to you. So without any further ado, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Lazzarini. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and glad to see you. Happy New Year. Hoping 25 will bring us a lot of expected peace across the world. I will start just a little bit with a statement, go through what I shared this morning during the Security Council a closed session on the discussion we had, and then we will open, obviously, for the Q&A. So, as you know, I briefed the Security Council this morning in a closed session. I welcome the ceasefire and the hostage deal in Gaza, and I joined also the Secretary General in calling on all parties to ensure the deal is fully implemented. We need, and there is absolutely no doubt, a rapid, unhindered and uninterrupted humanitarian access to respond to the tremendous suffering in Gaza. And I'm also reminded that the ceasefire is only a starting point. As far as UNRWA is concerned, we are ready to support the international response by scaling up, like our partners, aid delivery. And we are ready to support also, at a later stage, the recovery of Gaza by resuming education and continuing to provide primary health care. I also warned this morning that in less than 2 weeks, the Knesset legislation to end UNRWA's operation in the occupied Palestinian territory will enter into force. Full implementation would be catastrophic. In Gaza, it would massively weaken the international humanitarian response, and this will immeasurably worsen an already dire, catastrophic living condition. The government of Israel claims that UNRWA service can be transferred to other entities. In fact, the agency's mandate and capacity to provide public-like services to an entire population are unique. UNRWA's ability to directly provide education and primary health care far exceed that of any other entity. These services, in reality, can only be transferred to a functioning state, public institution. UNRWA's personnel and services are also tightly woven into the social fabric of Gaza. The disintegration of the agency would intensify the breakdown of social order. So dismantling UNRWA now, outside a political process, would undermine the ceasefire agreement and sabotage Gaza's recovery and political transition. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority has stated clearly that it does not have the financial resource or the capacity to compensate for the loss of UNRWA's services. A chaotic dismantling of UNRWA will irreversibly harm the lives and the future of the Palestinians. And I believe it will obliterate their trust in the international community and any solution it attempts to facilitate. I also reminded the Council this morning about the fierce global disinformation campaign against the agency. As you know, and I said it many times here, there are intense diplomatic lobbying by the government of Israel, as well by affiliated NGOs, targeting parliaments and government in top donors' countries. Last time, I think I referred to the famous billboard and to the Google ad. I think you are all very much aware of this, and this is all paid by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jerusalem, which, as you all know, has received a boost of $150 million to pursue this reaching out. I have also drawn the attention that all these campaigns endanger our staff in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza, where 269 colleagues as of today have already been killed, but it also creates a permissive environment for the harassment of our representatives wherever they are, including in Europe and in the United States. So I also said a ceasefire in Gaza must be followed by a political transition that includes an orderly conclusion of UNRWA's mandate and the handover of its public-like services to empowered Palestinian institutions. And this is the path now followed by the Global Alliance for the implementation of the two-state solution, which, as you know, is currently led by Saudi Arabia, by the European Commission, together with the League of Arab States. So I reminded that we have a clear choice to do. Either we can allow UNRWA to implode because of the Knesset legislation and the suspension of funding of key donors, or we can allow the agency to progressively conclude its mandate within a political framework. So, just to remind, the agency is working very closely with the authority in Ramallah on how to meet education and healthcare needs in the OPT. We are the largest provider of primary healthcare in Gaza, where we still conduct, as of today, 17,000 consultations a day. And we are the second largest healthcare provider in the West Bank after the Palestinian Authority. Our health services and expertise are essential for building a strong national system. But as you know, and I said it many times, we have also a key role when it comes to education. Today, we have 650,000 girls and boys living in the rubble and being deeply traumatized. And absence of a functioning full-fledged state, there is no other capacity than UNRWA to bring such a number of children back to a learning environment. And if we fail to resume education in Gaza and to preserve it in the West Bank, we will sacrifice an entire generation of Palestinian children, and no doubt that this would have profound consequences for the future of the Palestinian and a Palestinian state. Maybe just to conclude, it's also critical that it is critical that the effort to dismantle UNRWA are not compounded also by the financial situation in which the agency is in. This is now also a major risk for the agency, since some key donors have decided to reduce or to stop the voluntary contribution to the agency. And I appeal to these donors, to the donor base, for an urgent increase in financial support as well as early disbursement. Finally, I add three asks today to the member of the Council and to member states. First, to prevent the implementation of the Knesset legislation, the agency personnel and services are integral to the success of the ceasefire. Two, to insist on a political path forward which clearly delineate UNRWA's role as the provider of essential services, especially in education and health. And finally, as I mentioned before, to ensure that the financial crisis does not abruptly end the agency life-saving work. Thank you. I will stop here.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lazzarini. I'll now turn the floor over to questions. First question goes to Edith Lederer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lazzarini. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, thank you very much for doing this briefing. What kind of response did you get from the Security Council in terms of taking any action, adopting any resolution, trying to keep UNRWA's operations going? And secondly, on the humanitarian side, which you're going to be involved with for the next 2 weeks anyway, what's happening in terms of security arrangements so that aid can actually get to those in need? Thank you.
Thank you. On the first question, as you know, it was a closed session, so I don't have to comment on the discussion this morning, but I shared with you basically my key messages to the member of the Council. As of today, there are discussions going on between mediator, the UN, Israeli about the modalities of the implementation of what has been agreed within the ceasefire agreement, and obviously these operational issues are also being discussed. As you know, we keep hearing about 600 trucks. The 600 trucks, obviously, the UN will not be the only partner and actors bringing trucks into Gaza. There are high expectations that the commercial sector also does it. But just to let you know that as a United Nations family, we stand ready to, to address this immense challenge ahead of us. We are looking at what's being available only for UNRWA. For example, we have more than 4,000 trucks waiting to enter into the Gaza strips, and half of it, it's already food and flour and so on. So yes, preparations are ongoing. There are discussions about how to make sure that the environment is also conducive. You might remember the number of discussions about the looting and the breakdown of civil order in Gaza. Part of it was also due to the scarcity of the goods being available. I believe that if we start to flood Gaza with assistance, they will certainly be also, that might also mitigate, in fact, this type of tension my colleagues have described more than once. But obviously, we need also an orderly, uninterrupted, unhindered access to the people, and the issue of security is also being discussed right now. What will be the outcome? I don't know yet.
Okay. Hussein?
With Al Jazeera Arabic. So you warn. Oops, I'm sorry. Sorry about this. So you warn for the future of UNRWA with the Knesset legislation going into place, a financial challenges facing it. So now with the ceasefire, when it goes into place and all of these risks that you are talking about, what other avenues are being discussed to actually make sure that the aid and distribution does happen? And I mean, was this discussed in the closed consultations? If after the legislation actually goes into place in a couple of weeks, and with all of these financial restraints, what are the other avenues for UNRWA and also for the humanitarian operation in general for Gaza?
You know, in all my interaction now for weeks with member states, I'm calling for the mandate of the agency to be inserted into a political framework in order to safeguard the mandate of the agency. So in Oslo this week or today, I highlighted the importance that the role of UNRWA be acknowledged as being key for the success of the implementation. A few days ago, we didn't know about the ceasefire, but would a ceasefire be reached for the implementation of the ceasefire, which seems now to be the case, and we'll see as from Sunday. And beyond that also, to make sure that if with all the ongoing political discussion about reinitiating a process and a transition which would lead to a political solution, that the role of UNRWA also be acknowledged. And each time I bring to the attention of the member state the choice I just highlighted before, what do we want? Do we want an abrupt end of the agency and create a vacuum, a void, with all its political impact? Or are we committed to a genuine process with an orderly handover, which basically I'm trying to promote? Now, there are some questions I cannot answer today. I was very clear 2 days ago. The intention of the agency is stay and deliver. So the question, we have two Knesset bills. One Knesset bill says there will be no presence and activities of UNRWA in the sovereign territory of the State of Israel. As we know, for the State of Israel, occupied East Jerusalem is part of the sovereign territory of Israel. So there will be an impact on East Jerusalem in 2 weeks' time. Then you have a second law which prevents any contact between Israeli officials and UNRWA officials. The law does not say stop the activity in the West Bank or Gaza, but prevent any contact. But de facto, if you have no bureaucratic or administrative relation, it makes your operational environment even more challenging. Now, I expect, because I keep being asked by colleagues, what happened on the 30th of October? I would say on the 30th of October, our health center in Gaza will still function. Our people in the shelter will still be working because we are doing life-saving activities with the community. Our school in the West Bank, if it is not an official holiday break, will be running, and the same with the health center. But it will have other type of impact. Presence of international staff. You cannot keep international staff if you have no visa. Same with a journalist. If you don't have a visa, you cannot go. So these are implications that we'll have to look at. But the determination of the agency is to do whatever is possible to fulfill our mandate, to deliver critical services, to alleviate the plight of the Palestinian refugees.
Michelle?
Thanks, Mr. Lazzarini. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. I think you may have just answered a question then. The 30th of January is the day you're expecting this law to come into effect. That's correct?
That's what we are being told, yes.
Yeah. And then, as you've just mentioned, you're expecting staff in Gaza and the West Bank to just continue working and try and deal with the implications of this law. I just want to drill down a little bit. What about finances? How are you expecting UNRWA's finances in terms of getting money into Gaza and into the West Bank to be impacted by these laws?
Well, the finances are processed through the banking system. So our staff, all our staff have a bank account, and the salaries are being processed from the UNRWA bank account to their personal account. So I do not expect that this will be prevented. It's separate from the implementation of the law. The law talks about direct relation between official of the Israeli government and official of UNRWA. So I hope that this will remain safeguarded. Now, my fear is that, and that was my call also to the member states, we will continue to deliver critical services to hundreds of thousands of people. So don't take decision to delay financial support because you believe that we cannot work. Our manpower remains the 17,000 employees between the West Bank and Gaza, for example, and the 13 other thousand staff that we have in the neighboring country who will continue to work.
And then just a really quick follow-up. Sorry, it's gone. Oh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lazzarini. Talal Haj from Al Arabiya and Al Hadath. You've answered most of my questions, actually, with your replies to my colleagues. I'd like to stress in one point the financial aspect as well. Have you had any promises from Arab states and partners and supporters of bridging the gap that will be created, that is being created by the boycott and by the decrease in funds from donor states for the future? And where will you be based, in Amman or somewhere else, running your organization, since I don't think you'll be able to enter and work in Israel? And since UNRWA is established by a resolution by the General Assembly, do you see any possibility of ending the work of UNRWA by the GA, or is it going to be there continuing the work in the background, helping the Palestinians and providing education and health services? Thank you.
You have many questions, huh? So, I mean, very shortly, I'm in constant contact with Arab state, but with our donor base in general, but also the Arab state about their financial contribution. Now, to your specific question, do we commit to bridge the gap? I wouldn't bring it that way, but are we committed to continue to provide financial support for the time being? The answer is yes, or at least these are the messages I am receiving. Will it be enough? I cannot answer this question at this stage. But I can tell you that we start the year without the contribution of traditional key donor who usually stepped in at this time of the year, which makes our financial situation even more difficult. I personally walk from everywhere and try to be in the region as much as possible. But as you know, I'm not in Jerusalem since June. I'm not authorized to enter in the occupied Palestinian territory since June. Now we will see with the visa of the remaining staff, and then we will have to look at what is the most logical place for them to continue to operate. But I'm not giving up into the fact that we need international staff to be present. Here I'm just talking about how do we handle the 28, 29 and so on, but obviously the aim is again to stay and deliver. On your question about, UNRWA has a mandate from the General Assembly. There was again a resolution in early December, in December. Very strong support of the member states. Ending the mandate of the agency is GA, obviously, competency. I do not have the feeling that there are any discussion of this nature. But again, we should aim at ending the mandate of UNRWA by genuinely investing in a political solution so that we have a legitimate counterpart to whom to hand over in the future the activities, the workforce of the agency.
Benny?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions on the conduct of UNRWA. You were talking about. I have a couple of questions on UNRWA's conduct. You referred to it as disinformation campaign by the Israeli government and affiliated NGOs, which, by the way, in that case, they are not NGOs anymore.
They have a name.
Yeah,
Government NGOs. There are many in Geneva.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But beside Israel, allegations have been made in countries like, well, United States, Switzerland, which I think you're familiar with, and others. Rather than addressing them, it seems to me, UNRWA has been talking about disinformation campaign. And more specifically, which is my second question, there was a list of allegations that was made recently by an NGO called UN Watch. And when we asked about it, we were told that you'd rather have them address them to you before they come out publicly. However, according to UN Watch, they sent you a few letters asking to meet, as well as Hillel Neuer, the director of UN Watch, made public videos on X asking you to meet with him, which was that request was denied. Can you address those two questions?
Yes. On the first question, the allegations you refer to are always the same. They pop up in the US, in Switzerland, or in other countries, but the source is always the same. So it's not multiple allegations, they just have an echo and traction from the same source. Now, as an agency, I have always been clear. Any substantiated allegation with substance will be investigated. And that's exactly what we have said to the Israeli government, and this is also the way we have investigated number of allegations the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has submitted to us. Now you are referring to another report. You're referring to an NGO, which is primarily an advocacy NGO. And I have to say, you know, just to respond to a public appeal for a meeting for the sake of doing even more advocacy, that's certainly not the way we can work between a UN agency and an NGO. Now, you ask me to comment on the report. We can go through all the specific. If as a journalist you are interested in knowing what happened and what the context was, I'm more than happy to provide you this information. I can give you just one example in the top of my head, because I keep hearing the same, that one day I went to Beirut, I met a political faction, and I struck a deal to give into their demand, and this featured very high on this report. This is wrong. I went to Beirut to tell them, don't even try to put any pressure on this organization, because if you do so, I will hand over to you the key of this agency. But for advocacy purposes, there is a need to twist, and this is part of a disinformation campaign. When you have billboards and you put a person, you say this is an UNRWA staff member, is only a terrorist, how do you believe our staff after that feel? We had recently a search in a house in Naples. The IDF entered into the house. Search saw that the person works for UNRWA. Ah, you're a terrorist. Force the person to give access to all the data of the computer. Keep saying, if you continue to work for a terrorist organization, we'll arrest you for terrorism. And the person has been brought for interrogation for hours. This is the impact of this kind of, I would say, statement, very loose, which in reality put our staff in danger. So if you have more precise question after that, you are welcome to engage with my office.
Very quick follow-up. Beside the public request for a meeting, they issued letters that they sent to you before, private letters that they sent to you before issuing the report. Did you receive them?
They are offered to meet colleagues that they haven't met because they want to be seen with me. I don't want to engage. For what? For which purpose? The purpose is not to address issues. The purpose is to amplify the negative campaign these people have. Because do absolutely no mistake, what is the purpose of that type of organization? To get rid of an agency like UNRWA, because they believe that by getting rid of an organization like UNRWA, you will strip one for all the Palestinians from the refugee status.
By the way, since Mr. Lazzarini pointed out the problems having to do with the safety of UNRWA staff, I wanted to remind you all that the number of UNRWA staff who have been killed since October 2023 is now up to 269. Deji?
Yes, Mr. Lazzarini, Shudachu with China Central Television. Very quick questions. There are multiple reports that the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in negotiation with the UN officials on a possibility to transfer the responsibilities of UNRWA. Are you in those UN officials? And also, it seems the implementation of the two bills are inevitable. In that way, do you see any areas or any space for UNRWA to operate in Israel? Maybe change a name, would that be a possibility? Or you have to transfer those operations to other institutions? And if I may, one last, do you see any space of you in the new state after the implementation of the two bills in this UNRWA, in this agency?
What, and I ask you back the question, what agency or NGOs has the capacity to ensure primary and secondary education of 600,000 girls and boys? A state can do this. The state can be the recipient of the handover. But if you look at UN agencies, there is no direct provider. You have agencies providing technical support, agencies sometimes in some emergency setting working with a given NGO. It's always very limited, both in scope and in time. So the real question is, who beside a public institution is responsible? And I think the Secretary General has been also very clear in his communication with the member states. In the absence of the response the international community put in place, being UNRWA in the absence of a political solution, it will be the obligation of the occupying power to provide, if they prevent us to provide these services, to provide these services. But there is absolutely no other UN agency geared to this type of activities. There is no UN agency having a workforce of 15,000 teachers, for example, and you have to follow the curriculum of the country where you are. So I don't know what the other agency would be. If the discussion is about can an agency bring more food, yes, an agency can bring more food, no doubt. Can an agency take over the public-like services of UNRWA? My answer is no. But a functioning Palestinian state, functioning empowered Palestinian institution could take over, no doubt about this. Okay. Just on the first question, I'm not aware. I read the same report than you. I asked colleagues. My colleagues are not aware too. So I don't know where this report is coming from. But I have no doubt that there are many, many discussions taking place.
Abdelhamid?
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Mr. Lazzarini. Abdelhamid Siam from the Arabic daily, Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have also a few questions. First, it is expected that the Rafah crossing will be open. Once it is open, UNRWA can channel its activities and supplies through Rafah crossing. Do you need a permission from Israel if you can function in Gaza through Rafah crossing? The second is normally there are crises between member states and UN missions, but normally over the special envoy. I mean, many countries declared a special envoy persona non grata. This is the first time ever that a member state had a problem with a whole humanitarian organization. Can you address this issue? If there is any precedent like that, why a member state should be permitted to try to dismantle a huge humanitarian organization? The last thing, UN Watch, which has been mentioned here, is not a UN Watch, has nothing to do with the UN. It's an Israeli cover for, it's a pro-Israeli NGO, which has nothing to do with the UN. They even hijacked the name of the UN and put it there. Are you aware of that? Thank you.
Thank you. On the Rafah crossing, first, let's see if it happens. For what? And then we have to see what are the coordination modalities for the crossing. So I cannot answer. It could be a solution in the future, but again, it's too early to answer. But we are definitely assessing it. On the question regarding the, a member state calling for the dismantling of an agency mandated by the GA, I have many times drawn the attention of the member states that we should do absolutely no mistakes. These are not just attacks on UNRWA. These are attacks on the global multilateral system. And if we let it go, we will create a new standard. And if we have a new standard, this will be a precedent for many other conflictual situations across the world. So I think the consequences might go far beyond what we are discussing right here, but it would be a further weakening of our broader multilateral system. On the last one, it's a name. I cannot comment more than that.
Okay. Maggie?
Hi, Mr. Lazzarini. It's Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. Could you tell us, walking into 2025, how much cash in hand you have at UNRWA because of the financial crisis? And as of February 1st, what do you see the fate of the 17,000 employees being? Will they remain on the payroll? Will it be safe for them to work? You outlined that situation that happened in Nablus where the employee was harassed and such. I mean, will it be safe for your employees to try to continue working? And finally, we were told last month, of course, that famine was imminent in North Gaza. Do you think that the ceasefire will avert a famine there? Will the northern Gaza be a priority in terms of getting aid in?
Let me start with the last question. Yes, of course, if we go full gear in the implementation of the ceasefire, we should be able to avert such a situation. We talk about hundreds of trucks going into Gaza on a daily basis. We also talk about movement of people within the Gaza Strip, so I expect that people from the south go to the north and so on, if it is implemented as we heard of. So the short answer is I believe that we would avert such a disaster. On February 1, again, we stay and deliver. So our schools in the West Bank will be open on February 1, unless they are forced to shut them down. But there is nothing in the law which prevent the schools to be open on February 1 and the health center to be open in the West Bank or health center in Gaza Strip. So I expect that this activity will continue. I expect disruption in East Jerusalem. To which extent, I don't know, but I think if disruption there will be in East Jerusalem. Because it falls under different law. Now, also to be clear, we haven't received any directive, any guidance on how this law will be implemented for the time being. We keep hearing that they might be implemented in different ways depending on whether we talk about the West Bank, East Jerusalem, or Gaza, but we have absolutely no clarity because nothing has been issued yet. On the finance, we will be able to process January. We don't have enough for February for the time being, so I'm reaching out number of member states. So the first quarter, which normally and traditionally is a quarter where we should not worry at all, is already under huge stress. Now, the exact situation, I have to look at the various portal. I don't have them with me right now. But on the salary, I cannot tell you that we have the resource to process them in February at this stage.
Ephraim?
Thank you so much. Ephraim Kusaifi from Arab News Daily. I have two questions, please. The first one about the family archives that UNRWA has brought to safety, to use
Yes.
your words, and has been digitized. First, can you tell us where have they been brought physically? And second, what is the significance of this move in light of all the attacks on UNRWA, and also in light that these attacks have been accompanied by statements from the most extreme elements in Israel saying there's no such thing as the Palestinian people. We're even hearing about ethnic cleansing being called for, frankly. So what is the significance of these archives being brought to safety?
I think it's an immense significance. It's we have saved a large part of the history of the Palestinian refugees since '48. We talk about 30 million documents, which basically now have been archived, digitalized. It is true that many of these archives were also in Gaza. They were in Gaza when the war started, and that we succeeded to bring all these archives of the Palestinian refugees back to safety. It has taken quite a lot of time, a lot of courage also of many of our colleagues on the ground, but they have been brought to safety and they have been digitalized.
Okay. The second one, you just called the attack on UNRWA as also an attack on the global multilateral system. When we speak to member states here, from donor countries, including the EU and the US, they all say UNRWA is the backbone of humanity. They repeat what you say about the importance of UNRWA, but then that is not followed through at all by any levers to try to make this situation stop. So would you say they're undermining the system upon which their own countries are based? I mean, how do you address this issue, this discrepancy between affirming that UNRWA is important, but zero lever on Israel to stop its attack on the organization?
I think you can ask the same question about the importance of international humanitarian law and the blatant and constant disregard of the same law. You can ask the same question about resolution or rulings, resolution of the Security Council or GA, and disrespect. You can ask the same question about ICJ ruling. And so it's obviously frustrating. And sometimes one would expect that action gives a meaning to, ending impunity. What we have witnessed is an extraordinary crisis of impunity to the extent that the international humanitarian law is almost becoming irrelevant. Irrelevant if no mechanism are put in place to address the violation.
Don?
Thank you, Farhan. Hi, Mr. Lazzarini, Dawn Clancy with IPS News. I have two questions for you. Regarding the ceasefire deal and the promise of 600 trucks, how realistic is that beyond the concerns, the safety concerns that everybody's been talking about? Because right now there's a lot of looting and gangs. We hear about these gangs. How realistic is 600 trucks a day, given everything that's been going on in Gaza and the humanitarian systems that have been destroyed or are not currently working? And then my second question is, I'm assuming that in the Security Council, the closed consultations that you just had, you were dealing with the current U.S. administration as far as their representative, their diplomat. Have you had any discussion with the incoming U.S. administration about this ceasefire deal, given that it's been both the incoming and the current administration that have been working on the ceasefire deal? Thank you.
Thank you. How realistic? It's doable, but it's unrealistic to believe that the 600 truck would be brought only by the UN or humanitarian organization. The 600 would be realistic if you let the commercial flow go into Gaza. And if you look at the existing logistical capacity within Gaza, obviously it's more limited than the 600 truck. So to make it realistic, that means trucks coming from neighboring country would come and go directly to destination. So that's the way to do it. Will we have 600 trucks on the first day? I don't know. Your assumption is my assumption. But a target now has been given, and I really hope we reach this target be reached. But again, it cannot be just delivered by the United Nations. No way. So if that's the expectation, we won't. But if the expectation is a collective one with a commercial one, that's what prevailed before the war. Before October 7, you had an average of 500 trucks, more or less, entering into Gaza. Second question, it's your assumption. What I can tell you is that today, yesterday already, but today again, there are discussions between the parties, the sponsor, and the UN about how operationally do we make it happen as from a Sunday.
And if I can just follow up, you mentioned the commercial trucks. I've had a hard time understanding. There's reporting that commercial trucks into Gaza has slowed down. It's dipped quite significantly. Yes. I was just wondering if you could put that into context, what that means. I mean, I understand the less goods you have coming in, the less aid. But what is the significance of these commercial trucks?
Well, the significance is to allow people to have access to an affordable market and not to rely only and exclusively on direct humanitarian assistance. And the direct humanitarian assistance, anyway, is very much limited on the scope of goods being brought into Gaza. So if you want to enlarge this, you need to give space for a private market to re-emerge. And if we want to have a lasting impact, we definitely need the commercial.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Mr. Lazzarini. I'm Carrie Norton from Radio France Internationale and Le Monde. I have two questions. Let me ask them one by one. The first one is a follow-up on Maggie's question about money and budget. We've been told that a lot of donors came back last year. The EU came back. We know that the US Congress definitely blocked it for a year. Switzerland didn't renew its financing. But can you tell us which other big donors are still missing? And do you see new dynamics in place? Like, do Arab states, are they willing to finance more, for example?
You refer to January last year, when we had the horrible allegation about the staff who were accused for having participated to the October 7 attack. and that triggered immediately a suspension of 16 donors, you might remember. And at that time, an investigation on the allegation was put in place, plus also a review of all the oversight mechanism of the agency, the famous Catherine Colonna report. And most of the donors, almost all the donors, in fact, except the US, decided to unfreeze their contribution to the agency. And it is also true that last year we had a higher contribution from the Gulf countries than previous year. And last year also we had an extraordinary, I would say, support from private donor, which was quite unprecedented in the history of the agency, which was an indication also of the solidarity of the people. Now we have the US, indeed, which has frozen, and I have no indication that this will be unfrozen. We have also another country, Sweden, which has taken the decision in December to suspend the financial contribution to the agency. And we have heard the Dutch Parliament, which have taken decision that within a time frame of 4 years, they will, year after year, decrease their contribution. Switzerland has not yet taken a decision. They have provided 10 million Swiss francs last year, and there are still ongoing discussion right now.
And my second question, thank you for these precisions. My second question is, like, you've been talking about the role of UNRWA being acknowledged in a political process. To your knowledge, in the discussions which are currently ongoing right now for the ceasefire and the release of the hostage, is there any mention of this political process and the future of UNRWA?
This discussion have taken place more within the framework of the initiative on the Global Alliance for the Two-State Solution right now, where UNRWA has now been invited during each of the meetings. I think there have been 3 or 4 since it has been put in place in September. And there is an acknowledgement of a number of member states that indeed, if we are genuinely committed to political process, we need also within this framework address the question of the role of an agency like ours. So basically that's the shape of the current discussion. I believe it is very important because it's also a way to shield, in fact, the agency from attacks, putting the agency a little bit more in isolation. So we need a framework, and I think member states are very much aware of this.
Just to follow up.
We have to move things around so that because he only has a few more minutes. So let me get to questions online. Mike Wagenheim.
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, Commissioner General, for doing the briefing. I guess I'll ask my questions together. The first one, is any of the funding for UNRWA and the staff assignments, for that matter, fungible? Meaning, if you feel you have funding or staffing that becomes obsolete in some way because of the UNRWA laws that go into effect, can you move the money and can you move the staff to other UN organizations? That's my first question. The second question is, and I'll preface this, I'm Israeli, but I don't take a check from the government. I have my own criticisms of the government. But it seems that by assailing organizations like UN Watch as kind of agents of the government, it's removing your own and the agency's accountability. I mean, you have the head of Hamas in Lebanon working under your noses. Nobody apparently knew anything. There are other UN workers that were found to be terrorists. They posted online for years. Their bosses saw it. Their friends saw it. Nobody says anything. I mean, where is the accountability for UNRWA in this?
Yes. Listen, on the second question, you again refer to a case for which, when it has been brought to my attention, the person has been suspended, no pay, out of the agency, and an investigation was ongoing. And basically, we have asked not only internally, but also externally, and member states who might have information to a partner in the investigation. So I believe that as an agency, we have been quite prompt to take action once elements were drawn to our attention.
Why is it never known internally, I guess is my question.
Well,
why does the information always come externally?
I don't understand. Sorry, can you repeat?
Why do you count on the information to come from outside sources to bring it to your attention? Why is nobody in UNRWA ever aware of this?
I'm sorry to say, this came from, this was an internal decision with internal element, and after that, the story started to become public. We haven't reacted on information being made public, and after that, UNRWA is taking action in the opposite. And this, at that time, I know it because I was personally involved in that, has triggered huge pressure on our colleagues in country. Strikes have taken place. Staff have been prevented by the communities after that because they were manipulated to have access to our premises. And that's when I went to Beirut and I say, you prevent us one more day to operate because of that. I will just shut down all the activity and hand over the keys to you. Is this what you want? And on that day, they have decided that maybe they have gone too far, and our investigation after that has continued. But I refute the fact that we have reacted based on external pressure. This was identified at that time by the agency itself, and the agency has taken action. On the first question, technically, money can be moved with the authorization of a donor. Obviously, we have to agree. Technically, staff can be seconded from one agency to the other one. We are looking with our sister agencies at ways, in fact, at making sure, I mean, for example, I'm looking at sometimes seconding some function to make sure that the activity can properly continue, but from a different agency. So all this is doable, but needs to be looked at case by case.
Thank you, Commissioner General.
Do you have time for any more questions?
I
or?
don't. I look at my colleagues. Maybe one more.
Okay. All right. One more. Joe. Yeah. Just quick, because he has to be on the move. Joe.
Very quick. Thank you, Joseph Klein from Canada Free Press. Sir, last year you stated that membership in any militant or armed group or entity is prohibited for UNRWA staff. Are you prepared to say that Hamas falls into that category of a militant or armed group or entity? And if so, what efforts internally has UNRWA taken to screen its mostly Palestinian employees, including checking social media, to weed out any such member of a militant or armed group or entity? Thank you.
At the beginning of the question. So, I mean, does Hamas count as a militant armed group?
Yeah, Hamas has a militant armed group, no? Well, it's not up to me to characterize this, but it depends. Some country would characterize with a militant armed group. Other country will characterize as terrorist organization. What is the question?
How would you characterize it, sir?
How do you screen people, UNRWA staff, in terms of Hamas membership?
How would you characterize Hamas, sir? That's my question.
I characterize the way the United Nations characterize.
So you don't consider it an armed or militant group in which UNRWA staff would be prohibited?
An official of the Hamas or an armed Hamas militant has nothing to do with the United Nations and nothing to do with the UNRWA. So if your answer is, do we characterize? In that case, yes, we would characterize.
You do characterize Hamas as a militant or armed group.
No,
So
that's not what I said. You are twisting. I'm sorry. You are twisting what I am saying.
Please clarify, I'm sorry.
I am just saying that if a person is a known member of any armed militant group, including a Hamas, Jihad, or any other Palestinian faction armed group, this person has nothing to do with the United Nations, has nothing to do with UNRWA. This is what I said.
All right, thank you.
All right, and one clarification in case it wasn't in case it wasn't clear is just regarding Mr. Lazzarini's movements. He has been unable to enter Gaza since March of 2024 and has not had a fresh visa since, I believe, June of 2024.
Thank you for the clarification. In my head, it's January, so...
Oh, okay. Thanks very much, Mr. Lazzarini, and thanks for all the time.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. What happened to the UNRWA compound in Jerusalem?
We are off.